Namaste everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of Musings of Modern Mystic with me, Amy Yasmin. So I invite you to join me, taking a breath. Such a gift to just pause, to land in your body, acknowledge where you are, carve some time and space for you, for musing, for just reflecting. And otherwise enjoying, hopefully, this next 30 minutes as we muse on the theme of uncomfortable truths. And this first came up for me when I was beginning writing the book and reflecting back on times in my life when I've had the most uncomfortable experiences and how they've often been the starting point of profound growth in my life, though it was often uncomfortable, challenging. Being able to meet and acknowledge some uncomfortable truths has really helped me to transform my life, shift my perspectives and make some changes that have really supported me in life. So the biggest realisation for me at the time when I was in burnout, which was historic, it's a historic pattern to go full force into everything that I was doing, giving my time and energy everywhere as much as I could because I wanted to do as much as I could. I wanted to make as much of a difference as I could, and I wanted to be that ray of sunshine, that ray of positivity everywhere I went, armed with positive quotes and inspiring quotes. And I didn't realise I was actually denying many aspects of my experience. Because a lot of the time, at that time, I was not okay. I did not feel okay, did not feel positive, I did not feel upbeat or sunny. And it was only when I had a friend come and visit me, actually, and I could have cried there and then, when she visited me just before work with a bag of rescue remedy and calms, and the fact that she'd gone out of her way because she cared that much and she felt it mattered that much that I self-cared. That act really helped me to wake up to where I was at for myself. This person had a busy life, a busy world, many different plates to juggle, and they'd taken that time and that space because they felt it was important enough, it mattered enough to do something. And if it had mattered enough to them, then I needed to acknowledge that it mattered to me too, and to see from their perspective, see from a different perspective. And so I went and visited the doctor after that. That was a real eye-opener. Went to the doctor and I was given a one week note, which I may have already discussed, a sick note for a week off work. And really that week was a big coming to terms with I'm not okay, with just acknowledging and accepting where I was at, and in time coming to terms with the fact that it was okay not to be okay, that it was okay to say I was struggling, that it did not mean I was a failure, and cast no judgment upon me was no indication of who I was or how I could show up for the world. I'd feared that, having had an eating disorder when I was younger, to go to the doctor again and say I was struggling mentally, emotionally, I was having a hard time, felt like another admission of failure, because the first time round it had felt like failure. I'd felt like I'd really let myself down. I felt really guilty for how I realised it was impacting on people in the lives around me because they cared for me and they were seeing me declining and I wasn't seeing and acknowledging it. And this time round and subsequently has really come to awareness and coming to terms with this notion of it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to turn around and go, actually, today's been a really shit day. Today I've really struggled. Today I just need a friendly face, a smile, someone to talk to. It's okay to admit that. And that has taken time, and it continues to be part of the journey. Because there's times I can be quite hard on myself and think, well, look at the lives of other people, comparing others and thinking, well, actually, I've got it quite blessed. Pull yourself together, get on with it. Sometimes that helps, and sometimes it's important to actually go, it's okay. You're feeling rocky, acknowledge it. Be okay with it. And then that too can pass instead of holding it in, bottling it up. And these feelings that stir and sit in the body and can bring volcano-like moments where those feelings really show up to be heard and seen, because they've been ignored for so long that they reach a point they spill out. They have done for me in a way that they can't be ignored anymore. So acceptance has been a massive part of many moments that I've turned around, taken stock and gone, I'm not okay. And I've had one of them recently where I've gone, actually, I'm going to take note of where I'm at. I'm going to listen to the people around me. I'm going to listen to myself. It was actually me, for the first time, identifying and noticing in myself, wait a minute, how are you? Where are you at? Noticing old patterns, unhealthy habits, things that had come kind of quietly back into the forefront, quietly had come back into a pattern. And to go, that's where you're at and that's okay. Don't need to look at the past, don't need to judge it, don't need to create a story around it. Although my mind has been very active in doing that. Very quick to judge, very keen to compare. And instead just acknowledge this is where I'm at in this moment. And that's okay. I don't have to strive, push, force myself to feel any differently. Actually, part of the journey is to just go, hey, this is how I feel today. This is how I feel in this moment. And that feeling can dissipate. It might last a day, it might last a few days. It might be gone in an instant. So just being able to be okay and fully voice and acknowledge to myself, this is how I'm feeling in my body, in my mind, in my emotions, without getting too attached to the story of it, without becoming too pitiful. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way either. Sometimes that spiral can hold me and leave me feeling worse and worse and worse about my situation. So I look for invites to kind of pull me out of that. Acknowledging the beauty in the world, kindness of other people, offering a smile to other people. So that kind of acceptance would bring me to a place where I'd be aware that change was something I was wanting in my life, wanting to invite in, whether it was beliefs, thoughts, actions, ways of living, habits. And to accept the fact that change is natural. If I look at the natural world, if I look at the seeds that come and go, the flowers bloom, they die off, everything has its own season, cycle, lifespan. And so it was realising, like with the work at the time, actually there was something else there was part of me wanting to experience something new and different. I'd been in the same work for a long time, and the longer I was denying and trying to force myself to feel the way that I'd felt the day I'd walked into that workplace, that wasn't helpful, it wasn't healthy, and it wasn't changing anything. I was actually getting more and more frustrated with myself because I didn't feel differently, and I was judging myself for that, and I was trying to feel differently and forcing it. And inauthenticity, that it just, I knew it wasn't authentic, and that really bothered me. And so actually, especially in travel, coming to terms with the fact that change was natural, that sometimes I'd be at placement for a day, 3 days, a week, that change was natural, it was a part of life, it was a new chapter turn, and that when one door closed, literally another was opening, and it got easier to look for the openings and give thanks for the closings, and to not want to cling on to the old chapters, to kind of move a bit more gracefully through change. Whether that was friendships, placements, even jobs, whether people come and go in life, to come to terms with the fact that that's okay. to be patient and compassionate with myself in change. That was really massive for me, because I'd always be looking at what was coming next, where I'd like to be next, whether it was, moving on to different form of study, from college, high school to college, college to university, and expecting myself to ease into that transition effortlessly, and to I wanted to run before I could walk many, many times in my life, in many different things that I've tried. And so I'm coming to realise that it's okay to give myself the time, the space, the breather that I might need at times of change. To have a level of patience with myself, because I'm not going to get things perfect first time round, however much I set that expectation and try. Because change can be sticky, and there can be setbacks, especially changing habits. Those old kickbacks, those echoes might still ripple out for a while, and accepting that as part of the process has been another kind of learning over time, that actually one blip is not the end of the world. Falling back to an old pattern, it's seeing things as that's how you've habitually done things, and so it's going to take time. If you've been doing that for years, then yes, it might take a bit of time for that old habit to be replaced, for that to not be coming up in the first thing you turn to. And that's okay. So I also realised in those times of change, challenge, kind of coming to terms with where I was at and accepting, acknowledging it, I'd also often isolate myself, become very self-critical, and very inward at those times, and that could become quite unhealthy for me. Generally, the times that I was most struggling, I'd put the shutters up and shut the world out, and it would only be the closest people to me that would be aware something was not quite right with me, that something was different, that I was struggling. Even if I didn't voice it to them, they'd be able to pick up on it and know, because I tend to wear emotions quite clearly on me. Though I could hold that in quite well around work, I'd really learned to contain that. But that art, which had been helpful in a professional way, had also kind of led me to do that in my personal and private life. So I'd become good at hiding things from myself, denying things, distracting myself. And so journaling has made the world of difference, and continues to in this current time that I'm at, of acceptance and cultivating change in my life. In becoming self-aware of the roots of patterns and habits, of motivations that might help me to follow through with change, with ways of extending self-care and compassion at times of change, to build in moments of pause, to give myself a chance to adjust. That's really key to me at the minute. And so I invite you to ask yourself, is there a habit, reaction you tend to notice in yourself when you're finding something really challenging? Do you reach out for help? Do you turn in on yourself? Do you tend to watch more things, turn to certain foods, and free of judgment, just kind of sitting with what patterns, what behaviours, what thoughts suggest to me that I'm not quite feeling right in myself? Journaling's helped me to be with some more uncomfortable aspects of myself, and to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths, and to be more okay about it. Because I've realised over time that every time I've sat, journaled and realised some of those patterns and habits, it's been an opportunity, an invitation to become more self-aware and to grow, change progressively over time. It's rarely been overnight, much as I'd have liked it to be, prayed for it to be, and yet it's always been, I've grown through the journey every time. And that's quite emotional as well, because there's been many deep, hard challenging journeys. Anorexia experiences were definitely not a walk in the park, and I'm blessed to not be in the mind space that I have been in the past. That has been such a challenge and such a toxic environment to be in, and has felt so like being in confinement and having someone, a torturer, standing over you 24/7, drip feeding you, shouting, whispering, constantly poking and prodding at all those things least happy about, just creating disturbance constantly, creating aggro constantly, like it was thriving on stirring the pot. And seeing the fallout of that in the lives of people I love, and also where that had taken me in life, it's profound to realise that just slowing down, reflecting, journaling, meditating, I've come to experience a more authentic sense of self. I've come to find something deeper than those more surface thoughts, beliefs. It's become easier to discern voices and give them names. I have a friend in the women's circle who, Rebecca, bless you, who shared with us how she created a character. She gave each voice in her head a name, whether that's, slave driver Sally, or self-critical Sally, or upbeat Ursula, just to notice the different voices when they might come in more, and to go, actually, wait a minute, slave driver Sally's in the driver's seat right now, and do I want her to be in the driver's seat? Why, exploring why I'm behaving, acting out, speaking in the way that I am. Wait a minute, what story am I being fed? What am I acting from? What am I reacting from? Who's in the driver's seat right now? That's really been helpful to me, to start to discern different aspects of the self, and to not to deny any of them as well, and to go, actually, every one of those characters in my head has something to tell me, and they're here for a reason. I might outgrow some of them, I might grow, and as some friendships do, as some relationships do, and some of the relationships that have seen the most unhealthy, they've still been teaching something, and they might one day I might wave, and that might be that. And it might be that they remain because there's still lessons to teach me. It's become easier to acknowledge them and to not deny them, run away from them, try and distract myself from acknowledging them. Really bearing witness to the different aspects of myself. And also that's made it easier to see it in the world. To bear witness to some of the greatest challenges, to witness without fully taking in the pain of seeing a tree cut down. When I came back from New Zealand, I was so sensitive. I've often been a very sensitive and empathetic person, as we discussed last week. And so when I came back from New Zealand, having connected so deeply to the land and to nature and to Mother Earth, to something bigger, vaster, to feel like part of a wider community than I'd ever imagined on so many levels. And to see a tree cut down, I felt it. I remember I was driving in New Zealand at one point, we're going down a state highway. I've been at this placement for about 2 months. I know these lands, I know these trees, I've walked among them, driven past them regularly. And we were driving the one day, and there's just this scar on the landscape. Like, there'd been swathes and swathes of, I think they'd been pine, probably planted for foresting. But anyway, there'd been swathes and swathes of these trees, and the mist would settle on them, and you see the sun shining on them in the mornings and evaporating off. And this day, they'd all been lopped down, and there was just some bare soil and stumps exposed. And I felt it. I tangibly felt it in my body. It was like a grief. It was an emptiness. It was this... I felt like I was driving past a graveyard. I could feel the weight of it. And so every time someone cut a hedge, every time someone killed anything like that, a bee, if I accidentally killed a fly, it would devastate me, literally. And instead being able to, over time, bear witness to the world without carrying pain and suffering in me, without taking it personally, without feeling helpless about it. Because me feeling awful, me feeling and carrying grief and suffering wasn't changing things, wasn't changing the way people were treating nature, it wasn't changing the fact that trees were being cut down, it wasn't changing the fact, if someone was having a challenge, me feeling bad for them wasn't changing their situation, it wasn't helping them. And so realising that actually, when I change the way I look at things, perceive things, and just acknowledge it for what it is, be present to what is, that's made it easier. And to not attach to the story so that emotions can come and go, frustrations can come and go. I can get upset still, sensitive, buttons pushed. It can pass more easily now though, generally, because I'm more aware. Oh, wait a minute, this isn't forever. This is just a story, this is just a ripple, it'll move through. And sometimes that ripple takes days to move through. And it is what it is. So, how do you find yourself in times where you're feeling a discontentment inside? Where something doesn't feel quite right? What are your go-tos? What are your signs and signals that something beneath the surface is going on, something's bubbling? And how can you start to acknowledge that? And just inviting yourself, it's not homework, it's not, there's so much in the world of this healing. And I've tried it many times. And it's felt exhausting the amount of times I've gone, oh, wait a minute, but I need to heal this, and I need to heal this, and I need to heal this. And when you look for problems, I don't know about you, but I find them. And instead, stopping seeing everything as a problem and just accept and meet what's here now. I don't have to meet a week's time. There's some aims, goals, changes that I'd like to bring in. And what pulls me down is when I'm looking to where I'd like to be in a month, a year, as if it's going to happen here and now. And that disparity, it's like there's something pulling and stretching in me. Because there's part of me that's not quite there yet, not quite ready for that yet. No marathon runner ran a marathon the first time with no training, no food, no coach, it takes time to build up. You build up the miles, you build up the experience, the nutrition, the endurance, the mindset. Everything comes in its own time. So, what could you do? When you notice them things coming up, what could you do to afford yourself a breather? Some compassion, some support even. And that's something you could reflect and journal on. I actually have a self-care list, and I intend, though it doesn't always often happen, it's amazing to me, the first thing that tends to get dropped off my priority list in a day generally will be the self-care time, reading for 5 minutes for pleasure rather than for work or study, or sitting in the garden just to appreciate the garden, not doing the garden, not watering the garden. These little things where they're just moments just to be, they can be the things that drop first, because everything that needs to be done on a task list feels the most pressing. Surprising. So how can you extend care, compassion to yourself? For me, sometimes it's a bath, because it means I can't be doing anything else. I do soften and relax in a bath. Might be reading my book. Sometimes it is taking a book with me to go and sit at the park on my way back from work and just have a little bit of switch off decompression time in the beauty of the lands that we live in. There's one place that I adore, and at the minute the lily pads are full. The lilies are out, these white and slightly pinky lilies. There's some new reeds come up on the reed beds, or tall, like short Some of them are taller than others, grasses, but the new growth, that vibrant kind of spring-like green. Even in the summer, it's like these are just seem to be coming up and establishing, recovering. And there's always ripples on the surface of water. There's an oak tree that offers some shadow and shade just at the base with some grasses. Sometimes the soil is a bit kind of soggy and boggy, and there's blackberries at the minute. And it feels magic, that place. If fairies lived anywhere in this world, there is fairies at that lake. It's got that kind of, to me, it's got that magical feel to it. I can imagine them flying on the backs of the dragonflies and the damselflies that are whizzing around. It's just got a vibrance and aliveness, and there's that part of me and the imagination that's just so rich there. It just feels, it's become a really special place to me, and a place that I will stop and pause because I love it so much. So have you got any places like that? Whether it's nature, whether it's a book, whether it's an author you've loved way back when, or a book that you've read as a child and loved. That's really served me before. It might take me a while to get into a book, but once I've started reading something, it's getting started that can be the challenge. Because once I've started reading that book, I want to keep going. And so I want to make that 10 minutes a day happen. But until I've opened that book up, that might stay unread for 3 weeks. It's kind of bridging that gap, making that start. I actually started, when I started this practice of self-care, I set a timer, and I'm laughing at it. I set a 5-minute timer to guarantee that time every day. Because if I could sit and guarantee half an hour of doing my emails and an hour of editing on a book, or a qigong session, or 6 hours on a shift, or what, if I could make that commitment a commute to work, then I could commit to 5 minutes uninterrupted, sat down, whether with a drink, cup of tea, a book. I could give myself that, and more often than not I'd want more than that 5 minutes. And that was enough to me to want to each day ensure that that was part of my day, because I enjoyed it, realising how much enjoyment had been lacking in life. When there's times of change and challenge, how can you bring yourself respite, joy? How often do you feel you tap into something you enjoy, something that's restive, something that really becomes or feels like a highlight of the day, something you're looking forward to? Not so that you can run away from the rest of your life and wish out away the rest of the day. It's just, oh, wait a minute, there's something else for me too today. And I'm really looking forward to that cup of tea, to that 5 minutes to myself where I pull off at the country lane and sit for 5 minutes before I go home to a busy household. Whatever that is for you. How can you, just making the list, it took me a while between making the list and actually putting it into practice. So I invite you to contemplate it, to see if there's anything you might like to pick up, and to be patient with yourself and the time it may take. It's amazing for me. Same with qigong. I've had to do things to live them out, and over time realise how much of an effect they're having on my life, enough to keep wanting going. It takes a while to build up motivation and new habits and patterns. And that all starts with acceptance. So we've come full circle. I'm more able to sit with myself, to laugh at myself, to sometimes talk at myself, because there's different aspects of me. And all of them have something to say, different feelings and emotions. And it's easier to be with them now, to acknowledge that cohort, to acknowledge everyone's got their lessons, their gifts, every feeling a messenger. It's getting easier to ride the waves without being fully pulled into the storm. So thank you for joining me this week, and I wish you peace in whatever life and the wider world is bringing. I wish you waves of peace and self-care, self-love, acceptance of yourself in all your shades and all your colours. Because no one is perfect. There's many different aspects of the self, and none of them are more or less important, valid, true than any other. Just live out the fullness of your life. We came here to experience things, I believe. Every experience is here for a reason, every feeling. And maybe one day it'll all make sense. Until then, we laugh through the confusion. So thank you for joining me. I invite you to join me for a final breath together in community. Knowing someone out there is riding waves and ripples and challenges just as much as any other. And that there's a community out there anytime you feel to tap in. Just the acknowledgement, the awareness of that. That's been a gift and a balm to me. Take good care, everyone. It's a pleasure, and I'll see you again in a fortnight for the next episode of Musings of a Modern Mystic. Take good care.